So, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. It's going to be a slightly more old-fashioned panel. So, I'm going to read bios. We're going to have presentations. So, let me quickly introduce the topic before I introduce the panelists. So, the topic is about balancing privacy and data-driven applications. And many of these business models we talked about today, they may use personal data, for example, those related to energy consumption or those that have been collected from smart home devices in a home. So they can do many wonderful things. They can enable more rational ways to use energy, or enable more attractive services for consumers. But of course, there are a number of privacy issues. And I just want to say a few words about those. So, what can you derive from the smart home data or the consumption data that you get from a home? We don't exactly know. But what has happened in the last few years is that it has turned out that you can take relatively innocent data, let's say data that people have, for example, shared on social media, on Facebook, without actually stating any of these things, and you can derive things such as political beliefs, personality characteristics, sexual orientations. There were even people who were able to predict the onset of depression of people on Facebook before the people themselves knew. So there is, because of machine learning and AI, it's possible to derive from seemingly innocent data much more sensitive attributes. So, and that potentially what could happen from the home data, we have to imagine, but I just wanted to, before introducing the panelists, just give one example that I thought is sort of instructive. And that is, there is a little vacuum cleaner robot from iRobot. It's called Roomba, I believe. And this little vacuum cleaner doesn't just buzz around your house and cleans it, but while it's doing it, it is also creating a map and an outline of your apartment. And also from the obstacles in your apartment, so it doesn't run into the couch and stuff like that. So this map, this company has now been sharing this information with Google. So Google has now also the information for at least some users about the outline and the map of their home. And Google is now using it to customize smart home services, so you can say some things like, hey, clean the kitchen or so to the voice assistant. But they're currently saying they're not combining it with their large amount of data that they already have about consumers, where consumers are profiled for targeted advertising purposes. But of course, they could do that in the future. And I do definitely know that companies are interested in doing these things in the advertising space. So they, for example, want to find out who is watching the smart TV, which family member, so they can target the ad specifically. So those are the kind of things that they want to do. So even from a seemingly innocent vacuum cleaner, you can get a lot of potentially sensitive information about people. Think about which furniture you want to sell, how many people are in the family, did they just have a baby? All of those things may be derivable. So, the principal goals of this panel are to illuminate some of the privacy issues that we are facing today, and also, in particular, in connection to smart home data and to data-driven business models in the energy sector, and also to give you some ideas what successful companies can do to navigate the tension between the opportunities that are there and the privacy risks that need to be addressed. And we have a fabulous panel to speak about this, so I'm very excited. Let me first just read the bio. So again, I'm making it a little traditional. So first, I'm very happy that Frau Doris Gemeinhardt-Brenk is here. So Doris Gemeinhardt-Brenk is head of section of Digitisation, Interconnectivity and Internet platforms at the German Federal Network Agency for Electricity, Gas, Telecommunications, Post and Railways since autumn 2015. Prior to that, she was working on fundamental issues on the internet economy at the agency. In 2001, she started her work at the Federal Network Agency in the section on basic economic issues in the regulation of postal markets. Prior to joining public service, Ms. Gemeinhardt-Brenk worked for a number of years primarily as a market analyst for management consultancies. The entry into her professional career was in industry and trade associations, IHK, Chamber of Crafts, where she dealt with competition economics and economic analysis issues. She studied economics at the University of Mainz. So thank you very much for being here. Our next panelist is Dr. Juan Bernabe Moreno. He is the global head of the Advanced Analytics, AI, and Data Lab at E.ON. So he received a master's and PhD in computer science from the University of Granada, Spain. And he has been leading data science teams in the telecommunications industry at Telefonica for more than 8 years, and at present is heading the Global Advanced Analytics Unit at E.ON. His current research interests include, very impressive, fuzzy linguistic modeling, aggregation of information, information retrieval, bibliometrics, digital libraries, web quality evaluation, recommender systems, and social media. Some of his work has received Best Paper awards at different conferences. Dr. Bernabe Moreno specializes in exploiting statistical learning techniques to optimize business results in big corporations. In addition, he is active in the responsible use of data science and co-authored the Oxford Munich Code of Conduct for Professional Data Scientists. So thank you very much for coming from Munich on a day which is your vacation day, I know, so it's flying later to Spain. So thank you for being with us. I really appreciate it. Our next speaker is Professor Dr. Jens Strueker. Professor Strueker is the managing director of the Institute of Energy Economics at the Fresenius University of Applied Sciences in Frankfurt, Germany. He received his PhD and habilitation in Information Systems and Economics from the University of Freiburg after working as a visiting researcher at SAP Labs in Palo Alto. Currently, he is supervising several publicly industry-funded blockchain research projects. Jens authored the study Blockchain in the Energy Sector for the German Association of Energy and Water Industries, BDEW. In February, the German Energy Agency and 16 partners published a multi-stakeholder study, Blockchain in the Integrated Energy Transition, for which Jens led the technological and economic investigations. Recently, he authored the study, Digital Real-Time Energy Economy, Building Blocks for a Market-Based Target Model, for the German Business Association Economic Council, den Wirtschaftsrat der CDU. So also, thank you very much. So let's welcome all our panels and our panelists. And now we're starting with our first presentation from, so we're old-fashioned, so we actually have presentations by our panelists from Frau Gemeinhardt-Brenk, the increasing role of data in the regulated network sectors. Thank you very much. Can you please start the slides?
Yeah. I have to take the switch. Yes, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Shen, Mr. Beer, and ladies and gentlemen, thank you for having the opportunity to give you a short insight in our view on the role of digitization and data in the network sectors we are regulated. As you heard, I'm an economist, and therefore allow me to start with some figures. Up to now, the 6 of 10 of the most valuable companies in the world are digital platforms. We expect that within 15 years, the interconnected devices will rise from 20 billion up to 500 billions. And by the way, some insiders expect that in very few times, a normal person will have more conversation with bots than with its spoofs. Perhaps this is not only a problem of digitization. But the enabler for this development is at first the electricity sector, and the telecommunications sector. And the authority I'm representing here is regulating 4 sectors which are represented by networks, that is the telecommunications sector, the postal sector, the energy sector, and the railway sector. Today, I just want to talk only on telecommunication and energy sector. We see, and we have heard this morning very often, that the importance of the digitization, and with this digitization, the data as a production factor is growing enormous also in those network sectors. That means the processing of the different networks is more and more driven also by data. We see that also in those sectors we see new business models, and we see that, for instance, predictive maintenance becomes much more effective by data, but we also see that new companies enter the market which were not expected by the traditional providers of those markets. For instance, in the telecommunication sector, we have traditional telecommunication companies which roll out the infrastructure or which rent the infrastructure. And since some years, we see also services which enter the markets, like the normal internet, like you enter the internet, they also enter the markets offering special services which are called over-the-top services, and which are substitute the services of the traditional telecommunication companies. And those companies, the traditional, which are regulated by us, come to us and say, oh, that's not fair, because we have to fulfill strong rules, but they not, especially in connection with data protection. I have to say, we are a regulator. We just execute the law. We don't make the law. You have to have this in mind. But anyhow, the legislator has seen it, and the regulatory regime, which is a European-wide regime, will be changed, and those new players, the over-the-top services which offer over-the-top communication services, will in future be regulated as well. And for them, the especially strong data protection rules we have in the telecommunication sector will be active as well. That is one reaction on the digital development we see in the sectors. We have this in all sectors. In the energy sector, we have also a special development. We have discussed it this morning as well. We have the development of the renewable energies. That means that from a centralized energy production, we go to a decentralized production, and we have the total problem with managing the networks. In all cases, data becomes more important, and we don't only deal with data in connection with data protection, we also have to deal with data in the analyzing the markets we have to do. Because I haven't heard this word not so often today, we are a competition authority. Our job is to create competition in those markets, which in very often areas natural monopolies, and that was the idea. And we have to create competition, and we have to look for consumer protection. That is our task. And now we see a development that data becomes a more and more important production factor. And we see also, I don't know how you ever have analyzed markets, normally for economists, the price and the scarcity of the production factor is very, very important. And now we have a factor where companies offer services which you don't have anymore directly to pay with money, you only give your data. And now it's up to the economist to analyze markets where not only prices are important, but where also data are important. I will come to the special idea of data now. But to give you a short feeling how we are thinking of data is to look at this picture. We see we have data, and the data can create competition, but they can also impede competition. And on the other way, data can help to make value-added growth, but they can also prevent it. And value-added growth can create competition, and competition, again, creates value-added growth, and this will help to have innovation, and data can create competition if I have enough economies of scale and scope, and they can prevent competition if there is only exclusive access to data, if there is no transparency, and if there are different rules for the different players. That is the focus we are thinking of when we analyze and look at the competitive effects on the market we regulate. To deal with this production factor data, I just want to say, I heard this morning, I think several times, that was said that data is the new oil of the 21st century. I would deny it, because oil is a factor which is scarce. You use the oil and then it is over. But data is not rivalrous. It's perhaps sometimes excludable. But if you use my data and you use my data and I use them, they are still there. And therefore, it's not a physical factor. That is the difference, and that it makes it really complicated to deal with this in analyzing market. And besides this, the value of data often depends on other conditions, on the context you use them. Today, they are very valuable, and tomorrow, nothing worth. That means also the timeliness is important in looking at the data. And naturally, the capacity to extract information. And this I just want to mention as well when I heard this discussion this morning. What are data? There are a lot of different categories of data. And especially for the rules in connection with the GDPR, the data protection regulation, this only we have to differentiate between personal data and company data or anonymous data. For those data, the GDPR doesn't rule anymore. But for the normal company data, there are also rules like business secrets or something like that. But that is totally different. And this we always should have in mind if we discuss how we can use data. And then, to make it even more complicated, is that the regulation of the 4 sectors we are dealing with is very different. In the telecommunications sector, we have an asymmetric regulation. That means we look at special markets, is there competition or is there market power? And then when we say, yes, there is market power, we look which company has the market power, and this company will be regulated by being forced to give access to its infrastructure. And we regulate perhaps the rates for the infrastructure parts they rent. That is in the sector. And in the telecommunication sector, we have very strong data protection rules, stronger than the normal rules. That means telecommunications companies at the moment, that will change in the future a little bit, at the moment telecommunication companies only can serve data, was heißt speichern, serve?
Store.
Store, thank you. Can store data for their billing, yes? And for the management of the networks, and this only a short time, nothing more. They are not allowed to look in the content of the communication, not at all. That is a big difference, for instance, to the over-the-top services, the webmail services like Google, or the messages services like WhatsApp. At the moment, they still can do everything. The German Network Agency tried to force Google not to do so on the existing legal framework. We are waiting for a decision of the European Court next week. I don't know if we will succeed. And nevertheless, the legal surroundings will change, and therefore in future, oh yes, I will hurry up. And therefore in future this will change as well. Coming to the energy sector, there we have unbundling rules. That means over the value-added chain, only the networks are regulated. The generating of energy and the marketing of energy is not regulated. So, and besides this, there are also informational unbundling. That means for instance, the network providers are only allowed to use data they need for the managing of their network. And the marketed part can use the data they need for the marketing of the energy. That are the rules at the moment. And in future, when we will have rolled out smart meters, I hope, then also there are strong rules that also the data the smart meter gather, there is regulated that the network providers only are allowed to take the data they need for the managing of the network. Up to now, that are the rules. So I said it that the role of data in the energy sector is important. I would say especially for the managing of the networks at the moment, because of the more decentralized power generating. That means that the power comes from down to up, and I learned in former times they had to influence the networks per day only 1 or 2 times, and nowadays it goes up to 100 times. That has become more complicated, and as well the predictive maintenance is very, very much important. And now coming back to the data from the end customers, which in future will be generated by the smart meters, the energy companies can use them if the customer agrees. Yes, then he can do it. What do we do? The problem we have, that is to create the bias between data protection on the one side and to allow innovation on the other side. This we have. Therefore, we have to find good rules. One rule we see is, to look at the unbundling. But the other rule is, especially for the smaller DSOs, to allow data corporations which can support efficient grid operation. We have about 900 DSOs in Germany, and the smaller ones don't have the power to invest in digitization up to now. And there we see that it should be able to allow those corporations and to help to find corporations for those companies. Yes, thank you for your attention. I hope I have been in time, and I'm
yes, thank you very much.
Curious for the discussion.
May I just ask you one question? Please feel free to sit down. There has been quite some comments and criticism in the press and from industry representatives about how slow the smart meter rollout was going. And I was wondering if your perspective, if there are any lessons learned, how when we do regulation in this space, and this was particularly related to the privacy and security requirements, how we can do this in the future in order to make it a little more friendly for business. Is this even something that's being thought about, or is this a bad question?
Yes, we see the problem as the regulatory authority, but it's not our decision how it is dealt with the smart meters. It's the decision of the company, which is the authority which is responsible for the security of the infrastructure, and they made those rules. And at the moment, they have to find a third company which produce those smart meters, which they can give the allowance. And at the moment, they don't find them. Mm-hmm. It's not up to us. We see the problem as well, and we would be happy to be able to change it, but we can't.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Frau Gemeinhardt-Brenk. Our next speaker is Dr. Juan Bernabe Moreno. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm gonna just stand up. I don't need it. I don't have any slides. I'm doing it kind of slides free. I'm representing here the perspective of the practitioner and this privacy discussion. So my job at E.ON consists of just taking data and turning it into value for the company. So quite simple. Now, I want to offer several perspectives on data privacy, right, from the practitioner perspective, the people just working with data every day. First perspective is like, if you have to do with data, you really understand, for example, what GDPR is covering, what GDPR is not covering, right? So GDPR is not enough. So even if you are 100% GDPR compliant, you can do a lot that might even compromise the privacy, right? So that's one perspective. So you really need to go beyond GDPR and implement kind of a privacy-preserving strategy in your company. That's the first one, first perspective. Second, the value of the data multiplies when you combine different data sources. And people see that as kind of a threat, especially here in Germany. For example, right, we always say we need to put the customer in the driving seat. The customer needs to decide which data can be shared for which purpose, which is completely okay, right? Yet, for example, we are working very much in the smart home area, so we try to kind of anticipate ways of creating value with this smart metadata. First of all, I'm wearing one smart data myself, right? A smart meter myself. It's a Fitbit. It's registering my heartbeat. So it's a lot of information about myself here, right? If you apply clever algorithms, you can even kind of break down particular heartbeat variations to particular activities. For example, I'm running, I'm having dinner, I'm excited, I'm giving a talk, I'm going to be on vacation soon. So there are many events that you can just break down just by analyzing this time series of something that's measuring yourself anytime. Now, if you just use the same example with your home, right? A smart meter is kind of reporting according to a regulated frequency, the measurements of your energy consumption, so power consumption. And of course, you have a lot of opportunities to work with this data. You can even apply the same algorithms, a bit different, to kind of break this information down to particular events. For example, I'm washing, I'm watching TV, my fridge is on, I'm on vacation and somebody just broke into my home. You can do this kind of stuff. Now you can debate, is it something that can generate value for the users? Yes, it can. Can it be misused? It can be misused as well. The same as here, right? Now the question that we need to ask ourselves is like, to which point we want to put the user under control of this information? And the answer is obvious, 100%. But also from the society perspective, not the single individual perspective, that we all, right? What's the opportunity of leveraging this data for the social good of everybody? Best example, again, coming back to the Fitbit. My heartbeat, where I've been, my activity, can be used for clinical research. So I'm sharing my data because it's really priceless, monitoring my whole activity. You can monitor many, many, many activities from many people. And at the end, you can help address some conditions, heart conditions or some, So the opportunity of sharing the data, the value you can generate, not from the economic perspective, but from the social perspective, is huge. So when we think of privacy, there's a kind of another side, which is my data can generate a lot of benefit for people, right? And I think we really need to educate people a bit in terms of what's possible. AI is not always kind of threatening. So the advantages, what we can change with AI is massive, but AI needs data. Now, we are talking about AI. Let me just come back to what AI is and why it's so difficult to manage privacy in AI, right? A very traditional software program consists of data, right? Inputs, rules. So rules are what you kind of code. So if else, do that, and then you create an output. That's the traditional way. So these three elements: outputs, rules, data. Machine learning. Machine learning, you have inputs, it's data. You have outputs, and your machine learning algorithm is learning the rules. So it's different. And the rules, they are learned from the data, which means that this knowledge cannot exist without data. You cannot program these rules because these rules are inferred from this data, right? Now, you might say, well, according to GDPR, I can ask this company to delete my data. And companies have to do that. But what happens with the knowledge that has been generated using this data? So it's something that is very difficult to address. Now, what happens if, for example, companies like Google uses massive amounts of data, and at the end they end up, for example, there was an example of an algorithm recognizing pictures and tagging automatically these pictures. And it happened that, the press got very sensationalism in terms of, actually, these pictures, these black guys on a picture has been recognized as gorillas. Huge scandal. AI is bad, AI is racist. No, AI just learns from data and it's being wrongly tagged, right? So the consequence of having some knowledge stored in the false way can lead to unexpected outcomes. And that's why it's really important to get at least this privacy aspect into the machine learning algorithms well addressed. And to be honest, there's no patent for that so far. So it's a huge area of research. Now I want to also offer a perspective of how to use privacy as a business model, right? How many of you remember this campaign from, I think it was 1&1 about email made in Deutschland, so made in Germany? Anybody here? So 1&1 launched a campaign in terms of when Google came up with Gmail, well, we are watching you. So they decided to kind of jump onto this opportunity wagon and said, what if we offer emails just hosted in Germany and making sure that we don't go farther than we should go? Yeah? And they did. And actually many people use these emails made in Germany. The same can apply for something as fundamental as the smart meters rollout. So you can really use privacy as an asset. Privacy made in Germany. Maybe it's a new brand, but actually it does have an impact, even in the States. So Germany is known to be leading in privacy, so it's something that we can really exploit as a business model. Okay. And last but not least, I want to offer the perspective of the further we develop AI, the further, so the more opportunities, but the higher the risks. One example is, I'm a great fan of Dalí, Salvador Dalí, which is a Spanish painter, very famous. And 3 weeks ago, I read an article about a museum in Sarasota, so in Florida, where people could just converse with a living Dalí, right? Even Dalí could take a picture, a selfie with these people. Exactly the same, right? As you see Dalí in videos, the same conversation, so amazing. The technology used for that, which for me was amazing, is deep fakes. So you can just learn from a video movements, and you can just swap the faces, and you can generate kind of a reality about the person. If you start manipulating things that the person is doing, for me, it's a huge attack on privacy, because you are generating a fake reality about the person. In the case of the Dalí Museum, it was amazing. I mean, you can just see your kind of your hero painter live. But imagine the consequences in terms of generating false news or fake news, or generating even so. Well, there are many uses. Also, it was a huge in industries like porn and so on. Right? It can happen. That's the question. Is like the farther we go, the more complex the privacy question becomes. And the more difficult it is for us to address it. My personal view, consists of we cannot regulate these things because they are so extremely complex that they are not like GDPR black and white. What we need is a huge educational effort so that people know the challenges, people know what they are opting in for, and people also are aware of the consequences of several of these decisions. Also, education is very, very important, and education goes also for technology understanding. It's very important as well. That's one thing. And the other thing is like ethics. So it's really important to start bringing the ethical discussion into the. I'm not talking about the future of mankind, of what's the kind of what are the emotions of a robot. I'm not talking about this kind of ethics. Lovely topic, but not very practical in the industry. I'm talking about your data scientist today, writing an algorithm, understanding the consequences of making decisions, taking this data, creating this output, and also understanding the consequences of the algorithm not quite behaving in the way people expect. And that speaks again for sharing data. We've been talking here about predictive maintenance, right? The problem with predictive maintenance is very clear from the data science perspective. You just have a few cases where something went wrong, and you have tons of records. So what you do is like you kind of downsample all the other records, or just scale up or create kind of other samples of the cases you have. Which means that your algorithm is just limited to the data you have. Now, in the case of predictive maintenance, it's difficult to address because you don't have so many incidents in reality. In the case of an algorithm where you can really, sharing your data, help these guys to create a better output, a more qualitative output, you need to think about that. I think with that, I'm over my time. Yeah? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I also have a question for you. One of the goals of the panel is to, companies who embark on these new data-driven solutions, to give them some ideas what they can do to address these privacy risks. Is there something that you have learned from having worked on AI for a long time, some lessons you have learned or things that companies who go down this path that they should do in order to address some of these issues, other technologies that help addressing it? What are your thoughts on that?
I learned about that the hard way. Why? Because when I was working for Telefónica, we had a lot of data about handover events from one antenna to another one. So again, we wanted to use this data. If you hash the customer ID, is not enough because it's called pseudo-anonymization. which means that, by the way, it worked nicely in UK, Spain, and Brazil, but not in Germany. So it gives you an idea of how difficult different countries are. Maybe they are getting together now. But we ended up creating a platform to anonymize this data the German way, which means that no matter how you just cut the data, you couldn't get ever to a population of less than 5 individuals. Which was extremely difficult on one hand. On the other hand, it really destroyed the value of the data, because at the end, your data was so kind of altered that the value was a bit of kind of missing, right? There are other ways of doing that, but what I learned is like before you even think of creating value with data, privacy should be addressed at the first stage. Don't invest if you don't know how to address privacy, because you might end up having surprises. You also might be disappointing your customers. You might be disappointing the regulator. Nobody wants to do that. And that's the point. So you really need to address that. How? I think there are many resources nowadays. There are many frameworks to help addressing this privacy by design. But as I said, privacy is difficult to address by design because it's so complex, and it's really important to educate your people, also from the ethical perspective.
Thank you very much. And I had one more idea from your talk. Yeah. You're right, it must be done systematically with a methodology, because you spoke about DALI and that a personality was being changed. So this is like a non-traditional privacy risk. Usually we think of disclosure of information or others as or invasion, intrusion, and spam as things that we're concerned about. But this is another privacy risk. So doing a sophisticated privacy risk management of whatever new application you're building, I think, is another thing that would help to capture these kind of things that you were concerned about.
Indeed.
So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now let's have our last exciting speaker, Professor Strueker. He's going to tell us about the blockchain. So we had AI, now we're going to have blockchain. So it's going to getting all the important technologies.
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for having me. And as an academic, I won't speak about the problem of privacy. I want to talk about a solution. And in 2009. 2010, it was 2010, I think. I had the first look at a PhD thesis on Bitcoin. And at that time, I thought, okay, I don't understand it. It doesn't make sense at all. So we have come a long way. And to put it in a nutshell, I would say today, blockchain definitely, or blockchain technology definitely is one candidate, a promising candidate for privacy, or for a couple of privacy challenges we face. So, and I want to connect this to the energy sector, because as you can see, we are heading to a more and more real-time energy economy. You all know that we have more and more DRs, distributed energy resources. We want to integrate them. Our market system our market design is not ready for that. Nowhere on the world, nowhere. And we have to find solutions to that. This is one side, but just one aspect. The other aspect is that definitely trust is a kind of bottleneck here. And what I mean by this is, so first of all, we have an identity challenge here. If we want to integrate devices to its system, so things behind the meter, for instance, or an EV, an electric vehicle, we have to know that device. We have to prove this device is a car, etc. So we need an ID, hardware-based ID. This is one thing. And the other thing is, if we get data from this car, for instance, then we have to be sure about that this data is exactly the data that was sent to us. This is the other thing. So we have two challenges on this level here. And this is exactly where blockchain comes into play. So think about the internet today. We still have, as we heard, the challenge on the internet. When I send you a photo, a digital photo, you can make a copy and send it to everybody else. It's no problem at all. The only way we can avoid this is we have to exchange a credential, a key, something like this, and then we have a central authority, a party in between. And for a couple of things, it's totally okay. It's totally fine. Think about Gmail, etc., other things. It's okay. But for machine-to-machine communication, it's not okay. Because you want to exchange spontaneously between different parties and without, in advance, exchanging any data, credentials, etc. This would be an ideal situation. And if we now switch to the energy world, think about a battery today. A PV rooftop installation, a PV rooftop system, and you have a battery and you want to switch from one second to the other from a battery like you have self-consumption and then you want to switch to spot market or to ancillary services. Today, this is not possible. Why? We do not can prove the identity of a device. Nowhere. Not in California, not in the UK, not in China, not in Germany. It's not possible. Doesn't matter whether it's legal or not, that's another thing. But we need this kind of identity here, and we have to prove the data that it is definitely immutable. And this is what blockchain can deliver here, what blockchain provides as a promise. So over the last, I told you about my PhD, my first contact with blockchain or Bitcoin. We have come a long way over the last 10 years, of course. And we have a couple of very interesting solutions today. The maturity of blockchain, of different blockchain technologies, we don't have the time to talk about that. And I would say we still have a long way to go. On the other side, we can do pilots, we can do business today. It's already possible with the technology we have. We have a lot of challenges, of course, but it's possible. And if this is possible, then we have a next level here. And this means, and this is very interesting for all the challenges we see with privacy and also with security, IT security in the energy realm. Because if we can manage usage control for the first time, so if we can combine blockchain with things like homomorphic encryption, with zero knowledge proofs, etc., we are able to give you a photo and then I can hinder you to give it to somebody else. For instance, if you have a smart meter and smart meter data, we can put a tiny program I simplify, but to a smart contract, so on a blockchain. And then Florian gives me the data, his data, and I say, I'm a utility, maybe I can give you a better tariff. And you put the data into this smart contract, and then we analyze the data, and I just get the result back. And that's totally fine for me as a utility because I want to have this data or this analysis, the result now. Nothing else, I just get the result, and that's okay. So privacy problem solved. So this is at least one example what we can do if we really give, via technology, people control over their data. It's not that blockchain here is a substitute for all the system we have in place, not at all. It's a complement. It's just a contribution, I think, a very promising contribution. So we have analyzed in our, Thomas mentioned that, our study we did with a couple of utilities and GE and Siemens, and we looked at a couple of different use cases, 11. And I don't want to go into detail here, but just one aspect here, certificates of origin. So to give you an impression, we analyzed a defined process here, then we looked at 14 different smart contract platforms with a couple of 20 criteria or so, and looked, okay, how does it make sense? How mature are the different technologies, etc.? What is the economic benefit here, and so on. But one thing was that we found out all the different use cases we had. When privacy was involved, private data or corporate data, there are already very promising, interesting technology in place, and we can use them. So most of the use cases we also could implement right now. A couple of them already are, and it's possible. We have the infrastructure blockchains for that, the layered one technologies for that. The Energy Web Foundation has one, very interesting. We have a couple of different others, private blockchains as well. Depends on the use case, of course, and this is not, so we are free to choose, and most of them are open source. So you can make a copy of them, you can use them on your own, and it's not that costly. So as an academic, I have to say, yes, it's a promising candidate blockchain for all these challenges we face today. And last statement here, if you look to AI, what does it mean for AI? If we look at the situation we have with algorithms today. As an academic, I look to papers, to scientific papers. I see wonderful algorithms there. I say, okay, that's interesting. How did you train them? Oh, I cannot show you the data. You will never find the data in a paper, of course not. But without the paper, you cannot understand how they trained the algorithm. So one thing here is, what about if we could validate the data, give them a certificate of origin, and we can prove, okay, this data comes from here. I give you a right to do this and that with my data here at that point. And that's very interesting. And especially, to give you an example, if you look at situations like now in California with all the EVs on the distribution grid level, it's so important to get the important data in real time. So then there is an amazing value of data, because right now I can show you, okay, where are my cars? What about the load? What about the forecast? And I need this data at that time. So not for training the system, but then for improve it, or at least in the situation to do the analysis we need. And this is important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have one question for you. And that is, I know you've been doing a lot of thought what the right sort of way is to approach privacy, and you have your thoughts on if it is about data minimization or usage. Can you tell us a little bit about what your perspective is and why you might think that some of the current debates around privacy are a little bit misguided?
Absolutely. So I would say that if you look to GDPR, to stay in control over data, this is one of the goals GDPR has, and it's different to the former approach. And the former approach over the last 20 years or so, especially in Germany, was always data minimization. So don't give data away. And we switched we are in a transition, not only in the energy sector, to a world with industrial internet, with like we call it in Europe or Germany, Industrie 4.0. We need data, we need communication between devices, and we don't want to avoid it. It doesn't make sense at all to train neural networks, etc., but we have to stay in control over the data. That's the difference. And I think it's possible to have both.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. I do want to open it up for questions for audience. I know we're almost out of time, but maybe we can still have a few minutes. So any questions from anybody of you about privacy? Yes, Stephen. Do you have the box for Stephen, please? Here, the box.
Kick it. We're in Germany, we can kick it, come on.
Thank you.
So actually, what I want is actually for each of the panelists to react to each of the presentations. I think that would be really, really interesting. So starting with Jens' presentation, does it address your call with respect to ethics and building capability on, let's call it, responsible innovation? And does it, for example, address your concern from a regulatory perspective? Take your time.
That was a question for me, yes? Yes, okay.
It's to both of you.
Yeah.
I would be really interested in the cross debate.
I would totally agree with him that we have to ask for every end user to be responsible for the data they give free. But I would say beside this, we need some basic rules. We need some basic data privacy rules we need. But over this, I totally agree, no regulatory company, not also we have a special authority which is responsible for the data, GDPR now, is able to look at every data every consumer gives to the platform of the world. And therefore, I also would totally agree that we need better information and education in dealing with data and in being active in the internet. I would agree, but we have general rules, and one important general rule is that the company which wants to use our data has to ask for my consent, and they have to ask it in an understandable way. And this I would ask for, and that this does not always exist. Yes, and we all, and that's my authority, and especially the authority which in Germany is responsible for data protection, they have to do more information on the dangers we have when we give our data without thinking about it. Yes, and that I'm speaking only on personal data. Yes, not on non-personal data.
From my perspective, I 100% subscribe with her. We need regulations, right? Regulations are an asset, or can be an asset. Now, regulations require some evolution, and we are talking about a very complex matter. Yeah. Matter that's evolving day by day. I mean, I'm following a lot of the research in this area. It's amazing what's going on, and the variety of use cases. It's very difficult to think that regulation can catch up at this particular speed. So in absence of fully regulated, which to be honest, I don't think is possible because of the complexity, I would put some more layers. One layer would be this educational layer. And I'm with you, so education starts by explaining the regulation, right? But it's not enough, you need to go farther than that. And then governing this education, so I understand that and I do the right thing, this ethical layer as well. In this combination, this stack, regulation, so education, ethical layer, I think we can get the problem addressed. What I think is a pity that people think that the benefits of AI really are not worthwhile the risks of privacy violations and so on. I think it's our responsibility to make the best of this technology, for which each and every single effort is welcome. That's my view.
Thank you very much. I think we have time for one more question. Tim.
Wow.
Good catch. Oh no, you.
I just talk to it. All right.
Just talk into the black.
I get it. So we talked about some of the implications of the data science and some of the issues around the regulatory process, but I'm very interested in how we look at consent. As a software industry person, we have a lot of experience with asking customers, citizens, to approve actions, and this comes up for many, many years in the world of end-user license agreements, which we all know are extremely long, complicated, nobody understands them, and so they do nothing except click. And I wonder what your perspective is when it comes to asking for consent around what could be very subtle requests, very sophisticated requests, simple requests, complicated requests, but every day, all day long, requests for consent. What guidance or kind of feedback would you give around that issue? Because I see this being potentially a very dangerous area where, in the end, other than the regulation, there is no consent because we just click, click, click. That's my question.
Thank you. Who would like to take this?
Thank you.
Well, I would address this question with another question. Can you raise your hand if you've read the terms and conditions of Google? Who read the terms and conditions of Google as a search engine? Really nobody here. Well, we have one here. Thank you. That's one of the problems with opt-ins. Sometimes it's like it's hidden in the terms and conditions. People don't know what they are really consenting. That's one thing. The other thing is like what I call opt-in blindness. You download one app, and you say yes, everything. I'm just interested in the benefit, which can be very dangerous at the end because it can, you end up having your pictures maybe share with somebody else, I don't know, or your contacts. Yeah. And third, the consent, the way it works today, is not ready or is not enabling sharing data. between applications. You give your consent to a company to use your data. Again, it's like a one-to-one relationship. What if it would be really great to allow this company to use your data with your consent to kind of merge it with other data, with other company, and create some more value. There's no, right now it doesn't technically work, so standards are not there, the legal framework is not there, I don't think anybody even dare to do that. So imagine just in the smart home area, wouldn't it be great just to kind of put together the energy data, your telecom data, your insurance data, it could be really awesome. You could kind of elevate the use cases for the final customer with their consent, right? So that's why, to me, the consent engineering today is not working very well. And I think that we need to address it sooner rather than later. That's my view.
Would you like to add?
Yeah, maybe I can add to this. We had one use case, this was wholesale market, wholesale trading with blockchain. And of course, if you look at smart contract, it's not a very good word, smart contract. I mean, it's not smart and it's not a contract, it's kind of autonomous program. So, but if we agree on that this kind of smart contract makes it possible that just the code is running, that we all want to, so there's alignment of interest there, and this code will run or it won't. So the thing is, a regulator obviously can contribute by defining the framework. So how do we write a smart contract if it's a regulated environment? Why not? So, and this could be one way to solve the problem here. But it's, of course, no, just a contribution. It doesn't solve the entire problem, but it can contribute, I'm sure.
One comment. What you described, we call it the privacy paradoxon. Yes? For instance, in Germany, yes, everyone privacy is very, very important. But we also see when you look in the internet, you're using your search machine, you have no time, you don't look, or you give the consent without thinking. We all do this, me too. But beside this, at first I said, is to better inform the people what they are doing, but also to inform the people on the business models of the companies which offer the services. For instance, I'm using messenger services which don't gather any data from me. And this is a decision you have to take. And the other solution also would be, and I don't know what the e-privacy regulation will bring in the future, it's not known, but that you have the choice between giving a consent or paying something. That would, for me, also be a good solution to decide, I don't want to give my data, but it is worth to give some pence for having the information. That also we have to think of, besides a good regulation area, yes.
All right. Difficult problem, not an intractable problem about consent. Thank you very much. Thank you for an excellent panel.